Once again, my name is Terry, and I am a candidate for the Dominican Sisters of Peace, which is the first stage of entering. And I'm super grateful to have been asked to even come here and talk about my story. I don't know the last time they're like, 20 minutes, talk about yourself. Okay, here we go. No, I was asked to talk about my discernment journey and how it's interwoven with Laudato Si, or care for creation. And those two things really, Laudato Si was really at the heart of my discernment journey. So I am thrilled to share that with you. And I'm labeling this my journey towards right relationship. Because I have a desire to live fully and to live well. And I think that that is the pathway. This right relationship is the pathway to do that. And I didn't come up with this idea myself. A lot of people have talked about this idea of right relationship. And Pope Francis is one of them. In his writing on the encyclical on the environment, Laudato Si, he says, the human person grows more, matures more, and is sanctified more to the extent that he or she enters into relationships, going out from themselves to live in communion with God, with others, and with all creatures. And in this way, they make their own that Trinitarian dynamism, which God imprinted in them when they were created. Basically, he's saying that we're created by a triune God. We're created by a God that is in constant relationship, and we were created for relationship and to be in right relationship. And we see this through a lot of examples. It's not just humans, but all of nature was meant to be in right relationship. We see this through a lot of different examples through the interconnectedness of ecosystems. Has anyone looked at the forest floor and all the roots that are intertwined? We see this through human search for the divine through all the ages and through all cultures. And we see this also through, I want to look at my notes real quick. Oh, right, through our brain science and through human psychology, we are wired for relationship. And specifically relationship, I'm saying, with God, with others, and with nature. And when they are all intertwined, when they're all working together, they feed into each other. And for example, whenever I decide to consume less to be able to honor the gifts of earth, I am taking care of, for others, my brothers and sisters that are poor and indigenous, that bear the brunt of climate change. And in doing that, it reorients my way of looking at the world and my values. And so all these things, these right relationship with those three kind of intertwine and feed each other. And so that's what I'm desiring and walking towards, this right relationship. And we're called to do that as humans. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about my background. So this is a picture of me at the aquarium that I worked at. And I have a background in environmental education. And I went to school in coastal North Carolina and majored in environmental science and biology. And throughout my time there, I was able to work for an aquarium and also for a sea turtle conservancy. And I had a lot of wonderful experiences diving into nature and learning about it. And through these experiences, I was able to do kind of wild things like lead tours in salt marshes through kayaking and wildlife tours, and doing underwater dive shows, educational dive shows, as the person standing outside of the tank with a mic. And I was able to invite people into a viewing of a sea turtle nesting and sea turtle hatchings. And there was a time when I lived on the island, we were like the wildlife control, right, for the island. And there was a time where we'd have like a hurt brown pelican in the laundry room and like baby sea turtles in our pantry. So during this time, there was this love of nature that was kind of coming up within me, and God was opening my heart to that through nature. And I got to experience the excitement and the beauty of nature. And I love God and I loved nature, and I just knew that they were interconnected somehow, but I really didn't have the language to express that. And it reminds me of a poem by Mary Oliver, one of my favorite poets, and it's called Thirst, but one of those lines is, "Love for you," meaning God, "love for the earth and love for you are having such a long conversation in my heart." And I felt like that was what was happening. I don't really understand this, but I'm talking about it and wrestling with it and enjoying the beauties that's around me. And then I had a pretty, these are the slides that are supposed to be hidden. You're going to see all of my back slides. Okay, so then I had a pretty pivotal change, I think, a turning point in my life whenever I accepted a job out in the Archdiocese of Seattle. And I was running their environmental education camping program. And I didn't realize that formally that environmentalism and Catholic theology even were connected. Like, I knew that was happening in my heart, but I didn't realize that there's a deep theology and there's a lot of background to it. And so I moved across the country. I was thrilled to learn more about this intersection, and I wanted to learn about it in the forests of the Pacific Northwest. This is literally where I worked, off the porch of the camp. And I moved in with camp staff and started living in community with them and working and inviting students out to a science camp that as a Catholic schools, and they came out to science camp, and we explored spirituality and science during their time there. And it was then, through my contacts with the Archdiocese and through friends that I was making, that I was learning more about Catholic social teaching. Just hadn't really heard about that before, and the 7 tenets are up here. I threw them up here because I don't think they're talked about enough. It's how we live out our faith tangibly. And so I still remember the time sitting at a table drinking fair trade coffee with my friend, and she was explaining how this works, that we walk in 2 feet in love, and one of them is social justice and the other one is charitable works, meaning when we love people, we are taking care of the things that oppress them, and we're also giving them the things that they need. And so I was learning all about this, and then I got to see it in action too, because my friends and my roommates, they were social justice warriors. They were so cool. They were connected to organizations like the Jesuit Volunteer Corps and L'Arche Community and the Catholic Worker, all of these folks that they're living and serving folks that were vulnerable and poor, sometimes even living alongside of the poor. And so I was just really taken by their witness of how to live their faith in action. And I was learning that it's not an aside to the Catholic faith. It's not just like if you get around to it, but it's an imperative to Jesus's call. And once again, Pope Francis mentions this in Laudato Si. He says, living our vocation to be protectors of God's handiwork, which I'm saying is like the earth and humans, is essential to a life of virtue. It's not an optional or secondary aspect of our Christian experience. It's an essential part, is living this way in love. All right. And I want to use this slide to talk about the rich church history in finding the divine in creation. So it's not just social teaching, but you go back for over 1,000 years, and there's been saints and theologians that have talked about this finding divine within creation. And how could you not with pictures like this? This was my first backpacking trip. I fell in love. This is Mount St. Helens, and I was like, oh, well, I'm always going backpacking. This is great. I dove into the stories and the writings of different saints, like St. Hildegard of Bingen. She was a rad lady, and Meister Eckhart, and Thomas Aquinas, and of course St. Francis of Assisi. He's a big favorite. And not only the saints talked about this, I mean, the popes have since the beginning of social teaching. So that is back into the late 1800s. The popes have talked about care for creation all the way through to Benedict and obviously to Pope Francis as well. I found out that the bishops have talked about caring for the environment since the 70s. And not to mention women religious have been living it out probably since the 60s and 70s too, and showing us how to live care for creation in the light of faith. So I was just getting immersed in this whole idea that, oh my gosh, there's a rich history that is connected to my faith. And it was thrilling, it really was. And then on June 18th, 2015, so Pope Francis wrote Laudato Si, and it came out. And the reason why I remember that date, because it's my birthday, and it was the best birthday present I have gotten, I think, so far. I don't think anyone can top it. I have to say that this document pretty much changed the way that I viewed my faith life, the way that I lived my life in general. And hard to sum it up, but I will do that in those three relationships. It taught me how to love my neighbor by stepping away from the things I don't need and to live simply so that others may simply live. I got pretty good at zero waste living, like using less plastic as much as I can, and that kind of stemmed from I was learning about the suffering that was happening in Louisiana in Cancer Alley, and my brothers and sisters down there, they're trying to currently build a 9th plastic refinery in the parish that they live in. And so I'm trying to not use as much plastic so they aren't going to be hurt, right? It teaches me how to love my neighbors in that way. I tried to listen to more indigenous wisdom. I became a big fan of thrift stores, yay, and buying things secondhand. So all these ways to be able to try to love my neighbor. I also learned how to love the earth by living in tune with Earth's rhythms and noticing and loving and caring about Earth community, which I include humans and non-humans alike, all of Earth community. And I spent time outside regularly. I got into backpacking. Look at this dorky hat. Isn't it great? Okay, I got into backpacking and I started a garden. And it allowed me to notice and appreciate these rhythms of the earth. And it also helped me love God more because I was able to celebrate God's goodness, beauty, and truth in the world around me. And I was still working at camp, so I was able to live, work, sing, and pray out in the outdoors on a regular basis. And I was celebrating a God of abundance, a creative God of abundance. And so Laudato Si opened those doors for me to be able to live and to realize and change my way of living. And that's what Pope Francis is calling us to do. He calls us to an ecological conversion. And that's a conversion of the heart that turns our lives upside down and refocuses on things that really matter. Once again, that right relationship. And Pope Francis, talking about this ecological conversion, says, it is a return to that simplicity, which allows us to stop and appreciate the small things, to be grateful for the opportunities which life affords us, and to be spiritually detached from what we possess, and not to succumb to sadness for what we lack. I'm still working on all of that, but it's a process. And during this time, after Laudato Si came out, I've been trying to work through all those different changes, that conversion in my life. God was working within me and opening my heart and compelling me to live deeply and live well like I desired. And so I knew a few things were true. At least they were true for me. So first of all, I desired God. The second of all, I knew that living in rhythm with cycles and seasons grounds me and is a tangible way that I honor God and earth and myself and others. It's being in those rhythms. And then thirdly, that living and praying alongside of others is a radical act of love, and it leads me to holiness. So those are some truths that I had come to. And some friends of mine had kind of similar desires, and so we discussed it and decided, you know what, we're going to start a lay intentional community. Kind of big words to basically say that we wanted to move in together and try to live these ideals out. And it was through this process that I kind of came upon a new idea. But I wanted 5 acres, I wanted goats, and I wanted to have a garden and open doors and to pray interwoven in between all of that. And God was calling me, He's pulling me into something deeper. But as kind of wild as all of those dreams and desires were, God actually had more radical plans for me. So it was in that discernment time in trying to figure out, okay, how are we going to start this community, that I sought out a spiritual director, someone who accompanies you, companions you in your spiritual journey. And actually, the Holy Spirit had been kind of nudging me for like 2 years, be like, hey, you should talk to this priest. And I was like, no. And eventually I said yes, and we started talking about my values and desires and whatever is needed to kind of lay the foundation for my next moves. And it was in those conversations that he was like, Terry, you know, I'm just saying this, but about 90% of what you like and what you want to do with your life lines up with religious life. And I was like, that's a terrible idea. I hate that idea. It's awful. And I came up with all these reasons why, like, that doesn't fit me. You know, this is not what I desire. And, you know, some of those were, I'm not holy enough. I have too much, you know, contempt for the hierarchical church. I just don't want to be a nun. You know, like it was things like that. Let me see. That was one I wanted to say. I never felt called, right? Like God never tapped me on the shoulder very clearly saying, hey, be a nun. I was like, no, he never said that to me. But it was through those small and movements and pulling deeper that God was actually speaking to me. That was what the call was. And so even though I had all those hesitations, I took the suggestion pretty seriously. And so the more I thought about it, the more I prayed about it, I saw that my gifts and my desires and for like community and spirituality really aligned with the lifestyle and the commitments of religious sisters. So at that point I was like, okay, God, I gotta listen. I gotta take some time to really listen and ask the right questions and see if this is something really, really for me. So I started ongoing conversations or continued ongoing conversations with trusted friends who really knew me well. I talked with mentors in my life. I met regularly with my spiritual director to kind of navigate this new ideas. And I cultivated time in prayer with God, a lot of it outdoors. And I asked myself some tough questions and even compared religious organizations or congregations. Like I made a checklist and like a whole chart to be like, which one do I like? What fits me most? And I eventually discovered Dominican Sisters of Peace. And I was originally pulled in by their commitment to ecology, and they have 5 ecology centers and live that out in spirit. But the more I looked at them, I also was just drawn to their justice work, their commitment to justice and peace building, and their energy towards the future. Right? They're not stuck in the past, and their desire to learn and to grow. And so I talked with them for like 2 years, but until that time, then after about 2 years, I moved into the house here in Columbus to join the Dominican Sisters of Peace. And so I'm still very much on this journey towards this is me from my entrance ceremony. You knock on the door, they like open the door for you. It's this very beautiful symbol. And so now I'm out at Shepherd's Corner, which is one of the ecology centers sponsored by the Dominican Sisters. And I am still very much on this journey of walking towards right relationship. I haven't got there. And I kind of have a feeling that it's going to continue for the rest of my life, this journey towards right relationship. But I'm really grateful that this path has brought me here and to be with you today. And just, I look forward to seeing what unfolds, because there's such abundance in what could possibly be. So that's all for my talk today. Thank you. Yeah.